So what I'm hoping to do is three things. Provide an overview, as I said, and I've titled my talk, Ageing, Migration, Cultural Diversity and Social Inclusion. And I know these are key challenges for local government areas dealing with our extraordinarily diverse population. I want to identify some gaps in policy and research and some new initiatives. And I want to end with a few ideas from my own research, my own current research, and present perhaps some models or frameworks to assist with age-friendly and related initiatives, especially for the evaluation of projects. And I know the evaluation of projects is something that local government and other providers find really challenging and difficult to do. So hopefully researchers from universities can assist with that. So just a few stats to start with. As I said in the introduction, we know that more and more people around the world are living longer, and older people make up a growing proportion of the world's population, and Australia is no exception. So just over 16% of Australia's population is aged over 65 as of the 2016 census, and that number is projected to increase dramatically in the coming years to around 7.5 million by the year 2050. It's also clear that the number of people in the older old age categories are also increasing, and that has a significant impact on our aged care sector, because it's the older old that generally need higher levels of service delivery. So these statistics define where we're going. But within that, we also have this extraordinarily diverse population. So you'll hear many speakers talk about COLD. COLD stands for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Populations, a reference to our multicultural communities. So not only are numbers of older people increasing, but the percentage of COLD seniors in all older age categories is increasing at a greater proportion to the Australian-born. So COLD seniors population has a higher concentration of people also in the older age categories. So as you can see from this graph, the population of Australian-born in southern Europe are ageing even more rapidly. For example, 57% of the Italy-born in Australia compared to 27% of the England-born were aged 65 or over in 2011. And I think that's gone up to 65% now. 65% of the Italy-born are over 65. Okay? So the COLD populations are older, and that's another challenge. I'd like to highlight the two largest groups. The light blue category on the chart represents people born in Europe, including the UK, so not just who we referred to as COLD. I think UK-born are also culturally and linguistically diverse, but that's the way the policy language works. And the green category, which represents people born in Asia. So this provides a really clear illustration that Australia's current overseas-born older population is mainly Southern European, but that the next wave will be from Asia. So we need to be prepared for that. And then you can see that the sub-Saharan African populations are going to be moving through as well. So this is indicative of the challenges in the future. Some stats specifically about WA. This figure highlights the changes for WA over time, and just noting again that seniors born in Asian countries such as India, the Philippines, China, Vietnam and Singapore and South Africa are increasing, while the southern European countries are decreasing, like Italy, Germany and the Netherlands. This is a lovely complex slide provided by Rita Asfar from Office of Multicultural Interests, and I can only pick out just a couple of points, but there's a host of information on the Office of Multicultural Interests website about ageing and these stats. So if you need more stats, have a look there, because it's likely to be there what you need. What I want to say most emphatically is that low English proficiency is a key factor for this population. It's still an issue even for the Southern Europeans who arrived in the 50s. 33% of COLD seniors have low English proficiency in WA, compared with only 3% of the total seniors population. So that's 1/10 of the COLD total population. Add to that low education, so sometimes limited literacy even in the birthplace language. So the translation of materials may not actually be a solution because there may be limited literacy in the home country language. So more COLD women than COLD men, and a much higher percentage, 5 minutes, than the general population. So what slide am I up to? Fortunately. Okay, so all older people have a set of challenges: increased risk of isolation, decreasing mobility, which adds to that risk, increasing need for services. Cold ageing has a set of specific challenges, cultural complexities, and I want to dwell on this point about independence in old age. We did some research not long ago comparing different groups and what it means to be old and what it means to age well. And interestingly, some of the groups, and the Dutch were the highlight example, think that aging well and aging independently, everybody wants to age independently, but for the Dutch, aging independently meant relying on the state and not on the family. For Italians and other more collectivist cultures, aging well and aging independently meant relying on the family and not on the state. So we can be confronted with diametrically different understandings about aging. And if you're providing services and the whole idea of receiving services is seen as somehow in contention with the family and what the family provides, that is a hurdle to overcome. Reliance on family members is itself an issue because it can lead to increased isolation if family members are working and older people are left on their own. Being new to the Australian healthcare system, and in particular the digital healthcare system, so the New Aged Care, My Aged Care website is a website. So digital literacy and social inclusion are becoming key issues. I want to move on to slide 9 because I'm at 6 minutes now. Katrina Stevens, who's my colleague who'll be presenting next, and I had the good fortune of being asked to evaluate the age-friendly local government grants program, which Stuart mentioned. Wonderful program that's really resulted in excellent uptake of age-friendly understanding in WA, leading to the World Health Organization membership. But there were some key findings from that local governments need assistance with providing evidence and measurable indicators of success, so evaluation of their programs, that it's difficult and challenging to deal with diversity, and that digital citizenship is a growing issue. So these are some of the issues that my current research deals with directly, and I'd be really keen to talk to you more about this. Our research is particularly focused on the thorny question of culture, the diversity issue, and this is not surprising given Australia's complex population. The 8 domains of an age-friendly community, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, were originally based on the 6 key determinants of active ageing. And as you can see, culture and gender are identified as broad factors that impact on all of the key domains. But what this tends to result in is that people are active in trying to have activities and initiatives that respond to the key determinants, because they're highlighted in circles and big dots. But dealing with those broad, overreaching things like culture and gender kind of easily get lost. They're just assumed to be part of it. So I want to share with you some ideas about targeting those issues, because they are kind of lost in the theory. So important research in the UK highlights the important role of what they call cultural brokers. Often these are members of the second migrant generation. These are people who were born in the host country to migrant parents, or they came out as young children and were schooled here. These kinds of people have great cultural competencies in both cultures and therefore can act as conduits or bridges for information. And this, in those communities where there's active use of these kinds of mediators, there's a better uptake of service and a better understanding of services. Our current project drills down into that brokerage model, and this is the kind of framework that you could use for evaluation. We try to map people's social networks before the intervention and then map them afterwards as a qualitative way of providing some useful evidence about the impact of your intervention. Katrina's going to fortunately talk a bit more about this because I have run out of time. But what I want to share with you just a couple of stories, so I'm eating into my question time. And that is about how generally we tend to undervalue the role of the social support network. You know, if you go to the GP, they're likely to worry about your medication and what kind of physical activity you're having. But we also know that in order to take your medication properly, to eat well, and to do all the activities you need to do to age well and improve your health, you need a social support network to support you in doing that. So we're interested in social care, social relational care. And another thing that's particularly important for migrant groups is distant carers, or people who are actually not proximate or local to their support networks, but very important to their emotional well-being. So, for example, Mrs. Italiano, who moves into residential care, and with that move loses access to a simple thing like a phone call to her son who's living in the UK. And slowly that relationship can fall away when, with some interventions and some facilitated access, that son relationship could remain very active. And we're seeing patchy policy in the sector around, for example, access to those distant carers and those distant support networks. So, feeling slightly hysterical. One more story. We also see an increase in changes in the diversity makeup of the carer population. So a lot of care workers are from new and emerging communities, while the older people who are their clients are from the established communities. And that interaction is rife with issues. Sometimes there's no shared language. Here, new technologies and digital literacy can also revolutionise the relationship. You can imagine a care worker who has limited language shared with the client, organising and facilitating a Skype call with a daughter who lives in Melbourne, who has the language and the cultural skills to mediate, and improves the meaningful engagement between the care worker and the client. So these are some of the ideas that we're playing with around broadening support networks for older people, dealing with the opportunities that new technologies can deliver, and tackling language issues. I'll just leave you with a plug for an event we're having in December, where we're bringing out about 10 international speakers from across the globe who are working in this area of ageing and new media and new technologies. Registrations are open, and we'd love you to all come along and hear about global examples of work in this area. Thank you very much. Do I have any time for questions? Do you have any questions?
Loretta,
Yes.
What do you think is probably the two things that, whether a service provider or a local government or community, what can they do to try and start to bridge that gap of that digital literacy and that social isolation? What would be two key starting points, I guess?
Great question. Thank you very much, Irene. One of the problems is that we know very little about digital citizenship, except that it's a problem. These are the very scarce, poor stats that we currently have. And really, this doesn't tell us much. Because what is broadband connection? What is dial-up connection? But I mean, just a glance at these images shows that as you age, your access to the internet diminishes drastically. But today, more and more services are being provided through digital means. So we have a real issue about social inclusion. Local governments, of course, are using digital media to send out their information. What we're finding in our research is that it is a really hard task training older people to use new technology, but what is achievable is facilitated access. So building in means to facilitate that access. And the other thing we know is that, you know, every minute I think there's a new app developed in this area, and there's lots of work in medical technologies. We're not dealing with medical technologies, we're dealing with communication technologies that facilitate social support networks, okay? Quite a specific area that is even less researched. What we know from the medical technologies literature is that uptake is really abysmal. People have great ideas and invent wonderful gadgets and doodahs, but they're not taken up. And we know from our work on communication technologies and the use of them for older people is that unless it's embedded in a relationship of trust, it's not going to work. So we work on making the Skype call really be synonymous with the relationship with the daughter in Melbourne. Making the new technology a part of the care worker plan. Not making it an add-on magic pill extra, because it won't work that way, but embedding it in relationships of trust, making it a relational aspect of that service provision. I heard the crickets, I'm out of time. Nina, hi.
Loretta, grazie. Thank you very much. Can I just add just a comment on two things, if I may? One is the code, CAMD. I think so. From my point of view, that I'm living this, okay? And the other one is on expectations. Now, the older generation may have the expectation that the family will take the slack. But this expectation is not lived. I mean, I don't know, sometimes it is, but generally, in my experience, is not lived as a reality by the family, younger family members. And that actually dovetails with the use of technology. Because, if I'm quite au fait with technology, but lately, because of some health circumstances, I have lost interest. Also, some of the technology that you needed to get, say, to Centrelink is really difficult, It is too long. Like they have 8 voices on the menu. For you to get an appointment, it took me, with my 45 minutes. I went to sleep.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to reading your research.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Nina. I mean, you have highlighted some of the key issues that are coming from the client group, and the challenge is, responding to those. So thank you. But without further ado, let me call up my colleague Katrina Stevens, who will deliver the next presentation and hopefully do a better job than me at the time. Good luck, Katrina.